Hi, my name is Margot Medcourt. I'm coming from Nantes and I participate to Nantes en commun.
And my name is Clément Baraya from Nantes en commun.
So Nantes en commun is a municipalist movement or a communalist movement. Our main goal is to take power back on our lives, and we think that to do so we need to take the power back on our city to try to change the world where we live in our area, our city.
And so to do so, we are creating commons and make institutions outside of the institution. So that's how we think municipalism is getting something very interesting because it's a way of thinking that, citizens are creating their own city, and we are creating our own city in Nantes. So everything we do it like, we take the power back in energy, in food, in very specific and concrete matters.
My name is Johannes. I'm from Berlin, and I'm active with the Kiez team Mitte, which is a very central Kiez team of the campaign Deutsche Wohnen und Co. enteignen, which was active primarily last year in 2021 for a referendum campaign for the expropriation of the major private landlords in the city of Berlin, mobilizing a lot of people and eventually winning the vote with almost 60% of Berliners who voted for the expropriation of these companies.
We think elections are not the center of politics. We think elections is very important, that in our municipalist way of life and thinking, we think that elections is just a moment which can be useful for us to be known and to grow up and to convince people, but it's not the most important part. It's an everyday policy. It's an everyday thing we can do, and so if you win, it can be cool, but it can be complicated too. And if you lose, we just have to work on our municipality things. And we think that it's more about creating new institutions than to conquer actual institutions. So we can create things and create commons and make the city out of the city council is often more interesting.
But what I think how it relates to municipalism is really in this question of how can we bring about radical change through using existing forms of the institutions, right? And I'm not saying that like the way we've done it or Deutsche Wohnen und Co. is trying to do it is the best way, because now, speaking of the result we haven't seen any. Like the majority voted in favor of it, but there has been no change because elected government doesn't want to, it wasn't binding. The referendum wasn't binding, and the government is not really willing to implement it at this point. But still, there's we try to make use of existing forms of contestation, of this opportunity for people to run a referendum, of this opportunity for putting to the whole electorate a choice. Do you want all these apartments to be collectivized or not? And everybody who's going to vote that day has to put a cross and decide about it. So it's not really the same way some municipal actors would do it, thinking to really go into parliament and form their own electoral platforms. That's not that. But yet it's not only just activism on the streets and grassroots politics, but some intermediate form that uses certain institutionalized forms of political representation, like a referendum campaign, to bring a very radical topic into a more mainstream institutionalized form of discussion. And I think that's valuable, not only because it could potentially promise to really bring about the change. It hasn't happened yet, and we don't know if it will happen at this point. But also in terms of the discursive strategy, because doing that allows you to bring a very radical topic, the expropriation of houses, out of that very particular specific realm into a very mainstream conversation, because there's going to be an election about it, and there's going to be a vote about it, and every major newspaper has to write about it because it's an official election. So you bring something into the more institutional debate, and I think that's something that also municipalism tries to do, engage institutions in a creative way, not just do party politics like all the other parties, but still acknowledging that in order to really change something, you need to engage with these kind of institutions. And that's something that also the campaign tried to do, to engage with these institutions without being too involved in it. And that's, I think, something that one can also learn from the campaign.
My name is Frauke Gerstenberg. I'm an architect and part of Raumlabor Berlin and part of the ZKB, the corporate of the initiative of Haus der Statistik. And this group of ABBA, it's a group of, or it was a group of artists who protest the conditions renting ateliers in the city center. So they make an intervention on the Haus der Statistik, which was empty to this time since 2008. It was a big banner was signing up with here we'll build social housing, ateliers and space for social stuff. So, and before it, somebody noticed that it wasn't official, and the police come in the evening, they really document it in a very way, and it goes on Facebook and all the social media, and so it was really fast running through the scene in Berlin. Then in autumn of 2000 system, there we founded this group, this initiative for Haus der Statistik, and try make an offer to the city. So this was the starting point.
My name's Iona. I'm based in Glasgow and I work for SANE Collective, which stands for Solidarity Against Neoliberal Extremism. We try to operate from a space of kind of dual power where the council is concerned. So we may do things like writing open letters to the council, responding to the council's actions on social media and providing commentary on activity from the council. Slightly before my time, a couple of years ago, we ran a course called Grow Your Own Councillor, which was about trying to take people on this platform to actually try and enter Glasgow City Council and change things from within. And again, that would be part of what might happen under the People's Plan, is developing this list of policies that people may choose to stand as a candidate using the People's Plan as a kind of platform to get into the council that way. But the way that the council currently operates in Glasgow is not democratic. So right now, a lot of the ways that the council functions in Glasgow is that powers will be delegated or handed over to charities or other organisations that are kind of in partnerships with the council. And this is how we got to the situation we were at with the mass venue closures, was that all of these things, despite being publicly owned, had actually been kind of delegated over to a different organisation, and that organisation is unelectable. And so you've actually got a lot of the things that should be falling under the current kind of scope of power within Glasgow that actually you wouldn't have any control of by being a part of the council. So certainly a big part of our action is trying to draw things back into the council whilst at the same time critiquing it.
So my name is Julio. I work on a basic income. That's the large project, let's say, I work on as part of a movement. In Berlin, I work on a project called Circles. Circles UBI is a protocol for making basic income happen. I think if everyone in the city were to get a basic income through Circles, that would fundamentally change the structure of what we call the economy here, creating cooperative structures that can be more federated, where the cost of doing business can go down, and then all these people, producers, distributors, and so on, can have more like accessible things, no? Because today buying food that is kind of, here in Germany they call it bio. It's a privilege. It's a class privilege. It shouldn't be a class privilege, So I think the long-term goal, would be to challenge the state and claim the right to have a basic income, like not wait for it and just do it, and then be seen by the state, be recognized as a counterpower, as a force.
Yeah, I'm Cleo Mulet. I work for Transformation Haus und Feld, which is a project of social ecological transformation and creating a site for these concrete change we need on a local level, and it's happening in Berlin. We are working with the city government in Berlin, and it's real politics, and that's not, I'm not the best at it. There are people who are way more diplomatic and they can do that very good. But we have to, if we want to build up something which is not just dependent from project money, from fundraising for 1 year, and we have created 2 jobs, 2.5 people are paid to create a common garden, and then after 2 years, nothing really permanent lasts. And we haven't created more jobs, and we haven't created more infrastructure going in that space. So we need this cooperation with the Senate and the Berlin government, and it works like we went to them in the moment as we were a strong alliance enough. We had to grow before we could be taken seriously. They were nervous about us, why we were growing, but they weren't considering really working with us. But one day they came that we also had a big artist association within, and suddenly they had, and then stuff is also happening on a very informal way. Then one person knows the senator of art and culture, and they drink one night along, and then then there's acceptance to send the first concept, and then the discussion starts.
And what do they learn from this idea of engaging with the institutions? I don't know. And to be honest, I think at the moment there's more of a frustration with this approach. And there's more of an appeal to go back into a more bipolar thinking of either engaging with very grassroots activism, very local activism, doing things yourself because you can't rely on the institutions, and if you try, you'll spend all this energy and nothing will happen, or really using the institutions, going to the parties and trying to think how to use parties, how to change parties in such a way that they will be more sort of responsive to progressive goals, right? So my feeling at the moment is that, but that can change in the next year or so. But seeing that we've had this campaign and that the Berlin government is really trying to find ways why they don't have to implement the will of the majority of the Berliners. Is more of a disappointing experience for people who are trying to find this way of engaging with institutions and putting them back into the either institutions or outside.
So we make an offer that we will buy the building and make there a center for social activities, art, and temporary housing. This was the first try that we really found an investor, a social investor, who wants to buy it with us. And we thought we can't do something wrong buying this ground because it's directly on the Alexanderplatz. So also if we fail, we can sell it again. But they didn't sell it to us. So this was the first step. And then we starting to cooperate with the city after 2017, after this election. The city offer us be part of this cooperative, of the Coop 5, we always say now. It's a Berlin Immobilienmanagement. You have the VBM, it's a housing association. You have the Senate department, and you have this district department. Yeah. And us. And we built this cooperative to being possible to sign a contract and so on. Then in a second step, when we start up the cooperation, we start also a different way of working. That is a try to mix up these techniques, this expertise of bottom up and top down, and so start a different process of urban development. No, and I think perhaps the techniques or the method of this collaborative city planning is that you have always this learning process, yeah, so that you make a step, but after every step you look if it works or if it not works, and you ask both levels, the institution level and also the bottom-up level, and there you can really fasten up these learnings.
I mean, I think fundamentally as a framework, I deeply believe that we can create forms of governments that are not states, and that they can be founded upon local democracy, local direct democracy. I think the Kurdish movement, Kurdish women and Abdullah Öcalan call it democratic autonomy, I believe it is. But there are many instances of the same thing. In Chiapas, for example, where the Zapatistas have created like local autonomy. Also in places in the Andes, like Guatemala as well, there are forms that I wouldn't even call them municipalism, but they are forms of local democracy and local governance, of the stuff around you. I think as a practice and also as a concept, municipalism, at least, or like what I think some people refer to this Bookchin guy, like they call it liberatory municipalism or democratic municipalism. Like it's kind of can provide a good framework that you can use to then federate and create structures that go beyond the state. Of course, the dream is to have some sort of worldwide planetary democratic confederation of local municipalities that are kind of like interrelating with each other. And that has to happen at all levels. I think our contribution is only at the level of the economy and the money system, but it has to come also with health. It has to come also with different justice systems. It has to come also with different infrastructures, like not just the money, but also the how we do transportation, how we do the basis of life, basically. So I think for me, as a politics, it's kind of a way of democratizing life at the local level up, so local solutions for global problems. Politically, for me, from the basic income movement, since the pandemic started and even before, there have been many sort of local municipal attempts at doing basic income, of course from the level of mayors and existing state structures, and so that's a tension that I always hold about, like how to do this municipalism with the current political structures versus making just new ones as we do here in Berlin. Like, it's also, I wonder what you think about this as well, because of course, like, just because someone is a mayor and is kind of like doing things doesn't mean it's, sort of some sort of liberatory politics, right?
So in France, there are more and more groups, movements who define themselves as municipalist or communalist. And so we are trying to relate to each other and to give strength to what we do in France. So it's also very important for us to be here in the European Municipalist network because we know that the struggle is international and we have to organize ourselves more broadly.
We certainly are hugely inspired by municipalist cities across the globe, and certainly looking to take what has been learned there and apply it to the processes that we're trying to put into place. Feeling hugely inspired by everything that's happening in Rojava, Cooperation Jackson, Barcelona, and we are kind of trying to directly implement some of that stuff, particularly into the work that we're doing around people's assemblies in Glasgow. I think we certainly support the notion of a more radical municipalist vision for Glasgow. I think we're in a bit of an interesting political context in Scotland because Scotland is not currently an independent country. So right now, even the modes of governance that we do look at when we're trying to think about critiquing, it's not actually a full governance. And if we really think about it, we need to kind of be thinking about the UK governance as a whole. So if we were to try and achieve a kind of municipalist Glasgow in a non-independent Scotland, then we're still not talking about the full ability to be able to govern ourselves in the ways that we would want. So there's an interesting tension there. I think there is a huge amount of energy and there is a huge amount of will for people to be governing themselves, and people to a certain extent do tend to function that way, whether they call it municipalism or whether they think of it as a radical political act or not. I think it's just about harnessing that and bringing people together, because we are also a very divided city, but we have so much more in common than we think.
So essentially, I would say since election day, or since the month after until now, which is pretty much a year since the vote, that's exactly the debate. So what's the right way of going about it? And there's different opinions within the campaign. And there's those who would argue that what we need to do is need to lobby local government, need to talk to people in the government, need to do advocacy work to really convince those in power to implement the will of the people, which was elected upon in the election. And there's working groups within the campaign doing that, and working groups. There's an expert commission which is working on the topic now. That is sort of, there's a group working with this expert commission, lobbying that expert commission, and so on. And then there's other people who would argue that the experience now shows that we really need to think about counter institutions and really need to think about how to bring about change bottom up.
In terms of a strategy, like I think, it's also debate within the cooperative. Like we have people who are more anarchist leaning and people who are more like, let's say, pragmatic and leftists. They know that the state is broken at all levels, but they still say, okay, let's try at least have some sort of dialogue, no? So we've had events when we try to like talk about what we do and have like this, German bureaucrats and government officials come and like try to check it out and stuff. But to be honest, like the way that politics works in a place like Germany is really like, you have to build a movement and then you give it to a politician and then the politician is going to say, yeah or no. And I don't like that, I think that's really wrong.
This was one of the first steps we did, is like approaching the associations and groups working on the building for years. There were a few ones who were also claiming a use for the building in the sense of civil society, like creating, for example, universities placed there, or the Ernährungsrat, the food concepts, like kind of food sharing and saving space there. But they were all desperate because the council always said, yeah, that's sweet ideas, but no, no. And we gathered them. And then at one point we were strong enough, we were big enough, we were diverse enough to that they couldn't push us away and say the classical answer is, you're from civil society, it's very cool, you have good values, but no, you won't get in and you won't get money. And now we're getting a lot of money, but it's just because we're so big. I love municipalism. I'm desperate because I very often experience that people tell me when I try to say, yeah, but you could unseal, couldn't you? You are the mayor of this tiny city. You could do that. And then they tell me very long stories about rules that they are not master of it, and they can't tell, they can't decide because it's in the Landebene, so the regional hand, or at least in the national hand. And it's very, very often harsh break, a harsh enfreint, a break, and framing the development, stopping the development, make it very slow, that we don't have so many decision power on the local level. We need much more of that. And I think social ecological transformation needs this kind of power, local power. And without, we can't do all the huge work we have to realize.
That the situation has changed a lot. Now we have these big questions of transformation in the cities. And the local governments are also confronted with the global questions. And a lot of answers are unclear. We don't know what are the answers. And I think this is the point where the door open up for for other actors, not only for these institutions, because we know or we need other expertise. So, and I think the advantage or the competence of our group is that we are having a completely different background about doing experiments. And now it's really interesting, we start with this usage, so we are looking for actors in the social, in art, and in cultural production, and then what it builds up. Now we have these clusters, perhaps you heard about it yesterday, and one is about material uses, no? Another is about production of food, but local production of food. A third one is the city as a stage, so theater actors. And in all these clusters, they're interdisciplinary working. It's not the artist here and the social ones on the other hand. And so it really proves this idea of a city as an experimental space in a way. And they are already working on all these questions we had with the transformation. No, they are looking for other way of working with materials, other ways of working with or building, other ways of production of food. And I think this is really shows also the institutions, how it could work.
In 2020, we lost the election, but we had thousands of people who voted for us, who said, "Oh, it's great what you do," etc. And so we use this force and trying to build a real community with these people, with these supporters, and we had. 4,000 people who participated in investigations. So we contributed to the program, and they voted for us. And so we afterwards we opened a place to gather, like a cafe, a bar, and in this bar there is cultural, political, and social activities.
By creating counter institution, we think at the end we can conquer the current institutions, and the more you do, the more you can do. So action leads to action. So you just have to start.